Today's ICD-10 quick coding tip focuses on what you need to know about how to determine the final character for trimester when coding obstetric cases. My name is Claire and I'm an inpatient coding auditor. In my quick tips and tricks videos, you'll discover valuable insights to help sharpen your medical coding skills and code with confidence. If that sounds like something that would be helpful to you, please consider hitting that subscribe button so that you can be notified whenever I release new content. When coding obstetric cases, most codes from Chapter 15, Pregnancy, Childbirth, and the Puerperium, include a final character that identifies the specific trimester of pregnancy. The time frames for each trimester are provided at the beginning of the chapter. The first trimester is defined as less than 14 weeks and 0 days. The second trimester is defined as 14 weeks and 0 days to less than 28 weeks and 0 days. And the third trimester is defined as 28 weeks and 0 days up until delivery. In situations where the provider has only recorded the weeks of pregnancy without specifying the trimester, the definitions can be used to determine the appropriate trimester character. For instance, if the provider notes that the patient has completed 29 weeks of pregnancy, the code for the third trimester can be assigned using the provided trimester definitions. It's not necessary for the provider to explicitly state the third trimester in their documentation. Although the majority of codes in Chapter 15 have a final character indicating the trimester of pregnancy, some do not. If a code does not include an option for trimester, it is because the condition always occurs in a specific trimester, or the concept of pregnancy trimesters is not applicable to the condition. For example, Category 048, late pregnancy, does not include options for trimester because this category is assigned for pregnancies longer than 40 weeks gestation, and so it's only applicable to pregnancies that are in their third trimester. Additionally, certain obstetric codes may not include options for all 3 trimesters, instead offering codes that cover only 1 or 2 trimesters. This is due to the fact that certain conditions may not manifest in all trimesters, therefore only the trimesters in which they can occur are provided. For example, preeclampsia typically develops after the 20th week of pregnancy. Therefore, there are no specific codes for this condition in the first trimester, which is less than 14 weeks. For every category that includes codes for trimesters, there will also be an option for an unspecified trimester. This code should only be used in rare circumstances when the information in the record is insufficient to determine the trimester and obtaining clarification through a query is not possible. The final trimester character should be determined based on the provider's documentation of the trimester or number of weeks at the time of admission rather than the trimester when the condition developed. This guideline applies to both conditions that the patient had prior to pregnancy and conditions that arise during or are caused by the pregnancy. For example, if a patient develops anemia during their second trimester of pregnancy and is later admitted for symptomatic anemia in their third trimester, the appropriate trimester assigned for the anemia complicating pregnancy code would be the third trimester, reflecting the trimester the patient is in at the time of admission. The tabular list must be referenced in order to determine the final character for each trimester. This is indicated by the small dashes that appear after a code in the alphabetic index. A dash at the end of a code in the alphabetic index indicates that additional characters are needed. For example, when a patient is admitted to the hospital due to fetal bradycardia during their second trimester, begin by referencing the alphabetic index main term pregnancy, followed by the subterm complicated by, and then fetal heart rate or rhythm, which leads us to code 03683. The code in the alphabetic index ends with a dash, indicating that 03683 is not a complete code. In order to identify the final character, it is necessary to refer to the tabular list. Reviewing the tabular list for 03683, we find that the specific code for fetal heart rate abnormality in the second trimester is 03683. When a delivery takes place during the current admission, and there is an option for an in-childbirth code for the obstetric complication being coded, the in-childbirth code should be assigned. If the classification does not offer an obstetric code with an in-childbirth option, then you should assign a code that describes the current trimester. For instance, this patient has gestational diabetes and the fetus is large for gestational age. They are admitted at 39 weeks for induction of labor and deliver a healthy infant vaginally. When consulting the tabular to determine the appropriate code for gestational diabetes based on trimester, options are available for both the third trimester and in childbirth. Given that the patient delivered during their hospital stay, the code selected will be the in childbirth option. However, when using the tabular to determine the correct code for excessive fetal growth complicating the pregnancy based on trimester, the code options only provide choices for each trimester without a specific option for in childbirth. And so the code for the third trimester will be selected for this condition, as that was the trimester the patient was in at the time of admission. When a patient is admitted to a hospital for pregnancy complications that span multiple trimesters, the trimester character for the antepartum complication code should be assigned based on when the complication first developed, rather than the trimester at discharge. If the condition existed before the current admission or is a pre-existing condition, the trimester at the time of admission should be used. For instance, if a patient is admitted due to preeclampsia at the end of their second trimester and stay in the hospital long enough to cross over into their third trimester prior to discharge, the appropriate trimester for code selection is the second trimester, since that is the trimester that the patient was in at the time of admission. So that's it for today's quick tip. I really hope that this video was helpful for you. If it was, please give it a thumbs up, and if there's any topics that you would like me to cover in the future, just leave a comment below and I'll add them to my list. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy coding!